The story of Kalighat painting is the story of the transformation of a folk art form into a popular genre. It was the robust encounter of rural artists who had migrated to the city of Calcutta and the forces that operated there in the 19th century, the new manners and customs of the British settlers that had percolated in varying degrees to different social and economic strata. Kalighat painting tradition, which originated to provide icons of Hindu deities for private worship, but came to provide many other kinds of images as well, is associated with the famous pilgrimage site of the Kali temple on the southern edge of present-day Kolkata, on the banks of the river Hooghly, hence coining the term Kalighat. The tradition appears to have sprung up early 19th century to serve the needs of pilgrims who flocked to Calcutta, when a new temple structure dedicated to Kali, the goddess of death and destruction, was built by the Britishers in 1809. The earliest known reference to Kalighat painting is found in a book by Mrs. S.C. Belnose called Hindu and European Manners, that carries the image of a French husband's lithograph titled Interior of a Native Hut, published in 1832, with a Kalighat-style image of Shiva on the wall. The painting hung on the wall is an example of the primary function of Indian painting tradition associated with pilgrimage sites, where pilgrims of high and low caste carry back inexpensive religious souvenirs for display and private worship. An evidence of this phenomenon can be found in the fact that a number of them are studded with frames, along with European and Kolkata oleographs and prints, in the Havelis of Marwari Banyas in Rajasthan. These paintings first attracted the interest of J. Lockwood Kipling while he was the principal of the Lahore School of Art. He collected a series of watercolor paintings of Hindu gods and goddesses, which were gifted to the Victoria and Albert Museum on 8th August 1917 by his son Rudyard Kipling. This drew attention to what had hitherto been a neglected type of Indian art. At about the same time, critics in India also became aware of these Kalighat paintings. Prominent among them was Ajit Ghosh, who for the first time seriously praised the freshness and spontaneity of these remarkable paintings. The most recent research on this subject has been put forward by Jyotendra Jain.
As Calcutta became an important business center, also the area around Kalighat temple and the temple itself also was growing as an important center of pilgrimage. It might have been an important center of pilgrimage earlier, but the number of pilgrims that came to Kalighat temple, that increased because the number of transitory population that came to Calcutta also increased, because at some time Calcutta got connected with railway train, businesses increased, etc. And then Calcutta got connected not with other parts of India but also with other centers in Bengal. All this combined, and the rise of business and all, that brought a lot of floating population to Calcutta. And all those who came to Calcutta at that time, they went to Kalighat temple also, and therefore around the Kalighat temple I feel there was a lot of religious merchandise which was going on. And for my feeling, the the souvenirs that people, religious souvenirs that the people took along from around the temple, these, for my feeling, comprised of painted terracotta figures of gods and goddesses. But as people had to carry them away, as I said, that people now were coming from distances to Calcutta. So these figures that they were taking were breakable, they were fragile. And I feel that eventually people wanted something that was light, easy to carry and was not breakable. And therefore I feel that the Patuas who were selling these clay figures around the temple were also adept in painting.
কাঠের পুতুলটা এখন বিক্রি হয় না, কারণ কাঠের পুতুলটা তাড়াতাড়ি ফেটে যায়, যার জন্য এখন কাঠ আমাদের রাখা অসুবিধা ফেলছে, টাকার পুঁজি নষ্ট হচ্ছে। কিন্তু আমাদের এইসব মাল যেমন ফাটে না, এতে আপনি ওয়াশ ফোয়াশ সব কিছু করতে পারবেন, যার জন্য এটা আমরা রাখি, এতে কাস্টমাররা ক্যাচ করে এই মালটা।
And therefore I feel that eventually they began to paint these deities on paper for selling. Now I will tell you why I think this argument is strong. Because if you compare the clay figures of that period and if you compare the painted figures, there is tremendous similarity, as if it is the work of the same person. That's one. Secondly, the Patuas always had a tradition of making clay figures, and Patuas were also invited by the potter, the Kumar potters who were making Durga Puja images, etc., to paint the images. So they were used to painting three-dimensional images also. Then you see, a clay figure has no background. It's just a figure. And if you look at Kalighat painting, it is just plain background, as if the figure is transferred onto the paper. So several of these things considered, I feel that this new religious souvenir market developed around the temple, and Kalighat painting came out of that.
The period between 1820s to 1930s of Kalighat painting coincides with Kolkata's age of mechanical production, woodcut, lithography, oleography, printing, etc. It stemmed from the changing world of Kolkata, where layering and juxtaposition of old and new images overlapped. The unforeseen proliferation and mass consumption of the resultant new imagery in the city led to a remarkable transformation in the conceptualization and construction of the visual image, and the Kalighat painting was no exception to this.
Another thing that happened, that as Calcutta was modernizing, as I mentioned, so many things were coming from abroad. So machine-made paper came to India. Indians were using handmade paper. So machine-made paper came. Watercolor came to India. Indians had not known watercolor. What we had known was gouache. Now gouache is some kind of thick pigment which is not transparent. It is just opaque color. Whereas watercolor could show translucent effect, So watercolor came to India, photography came to India, proscenium stage and European style theatre came to India. As a result, what happened was, and as I mentioned, printed imagery was also coming to India. Now this whole new vocabulary and new tools that came to India, the Patuas who were sitting in the city of Calcutta, they began to respond.
For the emergence of the Kalighat idiom, one has to look at the traditional art practices of the Patuas and potters of Bengal, many of who had migrated to Kolkata and were instrumental in the development of this genre of painting. Equally crucial is the role played by Sutradhars and Bhaskars, carpenters and stoneworkers, who are also known to have practiced a style of painting that shared great similarities with the Kalighat genre. The Patua scroll painters, who had begun to migrate to Calcutta, at least from the beginning of the 19th century, and settled in several localities of the city, of which Patuapara near the Kalighat temple and Patuatola, situated in central Calcutta, are the best known. Though Kalighat emerged as the epicenter for these artworks, they were also sold at other less popular temples, weekly bazaars, and annual festivals or melas organized in several other localities of the city. The choice of watercolor as a medium for these paintings was the widespread supply of British goods in Kolkata, since it was the capital of India. The artists chose this medium as it allowed them to fulfill the prominent necessity of churning out paintings with brisk rapidity. But the end result reflects neither pure British watercolors nor pure Indian tempera look. It may be a possibility that displaced artists from the cities of Banaras, Lucknow and Patna migrated for greener pastures to Kolkata, which was the cultural and economic capital.
Kalighat paintings were basically watercolor, and the clean sweep, single sweep paintings to give the voluminous was later on, I won't say distorted, but many of the painters from Varanasi, Lucknow, they came and migrated to Calcutta, especially when Wajid Ali Shah was arrested and taken back to Calcutta. Many glass painters from there came to Calcutta, and they started, because Kalighat painting was selling that time, so they also moved there. Evidence of those paintings are there because Kalighat painting was watercolor, and what they did was tempera or gouache, miniature paintings, and they developed that same style, the same subject, but they were not really Kalighat painting that time. They are the same period, they tried to follow the same style, but there is a difference.
In the magical hands of the Kalighat painter, transparent watercolors are used in a distinctly Bengali manner, especially in creating soft, voluminous figures. Also, the translucent quality of watercolor opened the possibility of attaining certain luminosity and accentuated highlights. Kalighat painters did not so much practice the Western academic method of shading to give the illusion of the third dimension, but pursued a technique in which the contour itself became a simplified version of elaborate chiaroscuro, and as such performed the task of an astoundingly depictive and vigorous line. Sources of the oral tradition mention about two of the prominent Kalighat artists in the second half of the 19th century. They were the two brothers Nibaran Chandra Ghosh and Kali Chandra Ghosh, who together migrated to Kalighat from the adjacent districts of the 24 Parganas and died in 1930, aged over 80. Unfinished paintings indicate that the painters followed a number of steps one after the other in creating their works. First, they drew the composition in light pencil lines on paper, over which they laid transparent washes of color. Then, selectively applying shading in the form of a narrow band of graduated value, in a way adding a little depth to the voluminous figures, giving an impression of shallow relief. Finally, the artists added facial features, accentuated the edges of shapes, and certain details of dress such as jewelry, with contour lines of black or silver, a colloidal form of tin paint. According to some scholars, between 1840s and 1860s, the painters had turned to occasionally using faint lithograph contours instead of using pencil drawings at the initial stages. However, in the 1880s and 1890s, Kalighat artists started creating images only in line drawings, an economizing strategy that saved both their energy and time. Around the same time, they also painted miniature Kalighat putts on hardboard. The most prominent of them was Kali, in her fearsome pose riding the tiger and annihilating the demon or asura Mahisha, also represented wearing a skull necklace, holding a skull cup full of blood and her tongue dripping with blood. Many popular episodes from the Bhagavad Puran the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are also painted.
It is remarkable to see how Kalighat painting travelled from one places to other within the country as well as outside the country. In remote area in Mandasa district between border of Andhra Pradesh and Orissa, the Mandasa Palace had many works of Kalighat paintings, and they had these normal South Indian script written on them, which were part of the famous R.P. Gupta collection of Kalighat paintings. I had seen in Jayappa Swami's collection many Kalighat painting having this foil paper pasted on these painting to give highlight to the jewellery and things like you have in Raja Ravi Verma oleographs, bindis and things like that on that. Also these paintings not only travelled to India and remote areas, also it went to Warsaw Museum in Poland, Victoria Albert Museum. Many French missionaries who came in during 19th century had acquired these paintings. I've seen Pradosh Dasgupta's solo show at National Gallery of Modern Art. In the catalogue he had written that even Matisse was greatly influenced. I won't say greatly influenced is the wrong term, but influenced by Kalighat painting. And so was Picasso. I had seen in one of the books of Picasso the back cover almost as identical any Chitpur lithograph prints of that period.
Also presented are the various activities of the British. One of the works shows an Englishman on an elephant shooting a tiger. This representation can be paralleled in Williamson and Howitt's Oriental Field Sport, published in 1807, as well as the secular portraits. The subject of courtesans, dancing girls and prostitutes was not there in the rural Bengal paintings, but in Kalighat paintings they emerged as major subjects. Also, simple, non-glossy characters such as the Bhishti or water carrier were also represented, of which the prospective buyers were the British. Another prominent theme of these paintings was the depiction of the Bhadralok, the so-called cultured brown babus, the brown-skinned, newly rich educated Indians who copied the British ways of living and at the same time consciously distanced themselves from the local and the middle classes. But in doing so, they often find themselves stuck in embarrassing situations. Starting from the depictions of gods and goddesses, the subject of these paintings stretched and went to the extent of symbolic painting, reflecting the rivalry between religious sects. One of the paintings shows Shiva's lower garment taken away by Vishnu's carrier Garuda, and he's standing before his consort Parvati, totally naked and embarrassingly covering himself by a snake. Some subjects allowed humorous flirtations or scathing social criticism. Some appear symbolic, inviting interpretation. Portrayal of courtesans trampling their lovers and leading them on a leash like sheep appears satirical. But they can also be symbolizing female glory and can be considered the contemporary versions of Kali herself. In the same way, courtesans playing the veena can be representations of the wisdom goddess Saraswati. The image of a sheepish lover, in addition, may illustrate a Bengali tradition that has the mother-in-law saying to the bridegroom at his wedding, "I have purchased you with cowries, I have tied you with a rope, I have put a spindle in your hand. Now, bleat like a sheep."
Many times I had discussed about Kalighat paintings with late Nikhil Sarkar, one of the greatest art historian on 19th century Bengal. And he had told me that the best book which was produced by by Dr. Jatindra Jain, and he used to criticize Archers because Archer was not really he saw the painting and he gave his assessment without understanding the Bengal psyche of that period. Dr. Jain's reference to the Sutradhar and the carpenter and all, whose model later on became the main thing for Kalighat painting, was really appreciated by him. And he did tell me when he was reviewing his book in Anand Bazar Patrika that this was probably one of the best research book on by Dr. Jitendra Jain on Kalighat painting.
A famous contemporary episode in 1873, known as the Tarakeshwar murder case, that involved the seduction of a young Bengali wife, Elokesi, by the head priest of a temple, Mahanta. Her murder by her enraged husband. And the court trials of both the male protagonists created a furor in Kolkata. The Kalighat painters deplored the religious hypocrisy and painted a lively series on this controversial topic. The down-to-earth and playful conception of the cultic images is an important characteristic of the genre. Another striking feature of this idiom is the presence or absence of the halo or chala around figures of divine beings. The remarkable paintings of Kalighat inspired many artists in the following years. The most important of them is Jamini Roy and Gaganendranath Tagore. In his times, the nationalist movement against the colonial rule was making its presence felt in all spheres of life. On the cultural front, a renaissance appeared, especially in Bengal, where the artists were primarily engaged in rediscovering and regenerating the glorious past. Gaganendranath, on the other hand, in spite of his family's close association with revivalism, kept outside the pale of the parochial orthodoxy of modern Indian art.
My feeling, the greatest, one single great feature of Kalighat painting is that they were responding to new things. Otherwise, if you look at miniature paintings in Rajasthan, or if you look at temple sculpture or something, they were following a particular kind of work, a particular way of doing work for centuries, but they never responded to new things. After all, the new thing was happening to other areas also, but it was only in Calcutta that they were adopting modern situation in their work, and that I think was an extraordinary phenomenon. And therefore I often say that the Kalighat Patuas were the first moderns of Indian art, in the sense that they were responding to their contemporary or modern situation of their time. They were bringing it in their art.
The story of the end of the Kalighat genre is much less complex.